Hello and welcome to my presentation. My name is Mike and I'm going to be reviewing Total War Warhammer 3. Total War Warhammer 3 is a real-time strategy game for Microsoft Windows devices, Linux, and macOS devices. It's published by Sega and it's developed by Creative Assembly. And this particular game was released on February 17th, 2022. However, it is not the first game in the Total War franchise. It is only the most recent in a long list of games. Now, because the franchise is so well established, it has also a very well established following. The audience for Total War appreciates consistency and detail in their games. It's oftentimes appreciated when the player can have a large influence on the things that take place in the game, but without having to micromanage every single unit and city and building. Total War fans also value diverse styles of play. So if there are different factions in the game, they expect each different faction to appreciate different tactics and take advantage of different resources and encourage different play styles. These fans also appreciate emergent stories. If the game is able to work around what the player wants to do and tell a convincing and interesting and consistent story based off of the player's actions, then it's much more ludonarratively satisfying for the player. The game's developers, Creative Assembly, are, in a word, safe. They released a smattering of titles in the late 90s and early 2000s, but their flagship game has been, since the year 2000, Total War. However, the studio is still willing to take risks, and they're still willing to try new things within the Total War franchise. Where Total War games used to solely take place in historical settings, they have in more recent years branched out into fantasy and mythical settings. The game is divided into two central parts: a real-time strategy game and a turn-based strategy game. The real-time strategy mechanics are far and away very good for games of this genre. In a method similar to games such as StarCraft or Age of Empires, Total War allows the player to descend down over the battlefield and control different types of units against AI or player-driven armies. The player controls the placement of units on the field, as well as when and where they'll attack. They also have access to special moves and special characters that can both be a benefit to their own forces as well as a hindrance to enemy forces. Outside of the battlefield mechanics, the player is moved into a large strategic map where they have access to towns, cities, and the ability to move forces and resources between them. These settlements all provide unique resources, which are necessary to maintain armies and to continue your campaign. There are also special characters that can give bonuses to friendly sections of the map and can give penalties to enemy sections of the map. Along with this, there are other factions in the game, some of which may be friendly towards the player and willing to form alliances. The grand strategy section of the game is very similar to games like Stellaris or Crusader Kings. Now, unique to Total War Warhammer in particular is its fantasy setting. The player is in a world of orcs, dwarves, goblins, and the forces of the Chaos Gods. This allows the developers a huge range in variety when it comes to playstyles, characters, and special units and tactics that each faction can employ. It also adds some significant layer of appeal to players who simply like games set in fantasy genres. The fantasy setting is actually an important key to the game's popularity. Warhammer existed first as a tabletop game by Games Workshop, and was discontinued in 2015 in favor of its cousin, Warhammer 40k, a science fantasy game. Because Warhammer had already had an established following, the video game was in a good position to occupy a niche among players. From what I have studied, what players love most about the Total War Warhammer 3 game is not so much the genre or setting as the experience. Many players come from a background of Total War or Games Workshop products, and it can be difficult to compete with years of established nostalgia. If a developer wanted to create a game similar to this, it would need to be able to stand on its own. There is indeed a market for high fantasy grand strategy games, but Total War Warhammer 3 is a tough game to compete with.